The steak arrived perfectly seared, its edges crisped just enough to whisper of fire, its center still warm and red like a secret. Daniel Carter leaned back in his chair, studying it the way a man might study a decision he hadn't yet committed to. Around him, the restaurant hummed with quiet wealth, low conversations blending into a soft, expensive murmur, the delicate clink of crystal against porcelain, the occasional muted laugh that never rose too high. Everything here was designed to feel effortless, curated down to the smallest detail. He didn't belong here. Or rather, he belonged here more than anyone in the room, but not like this. Tonight, he was invisible. No tailored suit stitched in Milan. No security stationed subtly at the perimeter. No assistant hovering nearby with a discreet tablet, ready to remind him of names, numbers, leverage. Just a worn jacket that softened his shoulders, a simple watch that didn't draw the eye, and a name on the reservation that wasn't his. Dan. It felt almost like a joke. He picked up the knife, its weight familiar, balanced. The kind of tool you trusted not to fail under pressure. He cut into the steak with precision, watching the blade glide through as if it had been waiting for this exact moment. Juice pooled faintly along the cut, catching the warm light. Still, he didn't eat. Instead, his gaze lifted, drifting across the room in slow, practiced sweeps. He wasn't looking for anything specific, he was absorbing. Years of negotiation, of boardrooms and backroom deals, had taught him that the truth rarely announced itself. It revealed itself in fragments. A glance held too long. A voice lowered at the wrong moment. A pattern that didn't quite fit. At a corner table, a couple leaned toward each other, their smiles tight, brittle. Their conversation looked intimate from a distance, but Daniel could see the strain in the woman's jaw, the way her fingers tapped lightly against the table. Not affection, containment. Near the bar, a man spoke loudly into his phone, name-dropping with careless confidence. He wanted to be heard. Needed it, even. That kind of man was predictable. A family sat near the window, their table cluttered with plates and laughter. A child swung their legs under the chair, grinning as if the world hadn't yet taught them to measure joy. That kind of sound, unfiltered, unguarded, didn't belong in places like this. And yet, it was the most real thing in the room. Daniel's lips pressed together, almost forming a smile, but it faded before it could fully appear. Then he noticed her, the waitress. At first, there was nothing remarkable about her. Dark hair pulled back simply, uniform neat but not immaculate, movements efficient without being rehearsed. But the longer he watched, the more something stood out. She noticed things. Not in the obvious, trained way, any decent server could refill a glass or clear a plate. This was different. She anticipated, adjusted, moved not just in response to the room, but in quiet awareness of it. A napkin slipping from a guest's lap, she was already there before it hit the floor. A glass nearing empty, she refilled it without interrupting the conversation. A man growing impatient, she altered her path just enough to pass by his table, offering a brief acknowledgement that kept him from escalating. There was a rhythm to her, but beneath it, a tension. Like someone who couldn't afford to miss a beat. When she approached his table, Daniel straightened slightly, setting his knife down. Up close, her expression shifted, professional, composed, but not entirely detached. "Your steak, sir," she said softly. Her voice wasn't overly polished. No forced warmth. Just real. He nodded once. "Thanks." She placed the plate in front of him with care, aligning it. Instinctively. For a brief second, her fingers brushed the edge of the table, adjusting the fork so it sat just right. Then she hesitated. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Daniel noticed. Her eyes flicked up to meet his, not long enough to draw attention, but long enough to carry something. Urgency, maybe. Or warning. Before he could interpret it, she slid something beneath the edge of the plate. A folded piece of paper. The motion was smooth, concealed within the natural movement of setting the dish. Anyone else would have missed it. Daniel didn't react. Not outwardly. He simply reached for his napkin, unfolding it with measured calm, as if nothing unusual had occurred. His heartbeat didn't quicken. His breathing didn't change. Years of high-stakes negotiations had trained him well. Never reveal surprise, never acknowledge disruption until you understood it. She straightened, her posture returning to neutral. "Is there anything else I can get you?" "No," he said evenly. Another brief look, quicker this time, and then she turned, disappearing into the flow of the room. Daniel waited. He let the moment settle, stretching it just enough to avoid suspicion. 5 seconds. 10. 15. Then, casually, he lifted the plate a fraction, just enough to slide the folded paper into his palm. He set the plate back down without a sound, his movements precise, controlled. For a moment, he didn't open it. He simply held it, waited. Then he unfolded it beneath the table, shielding it from view. The handwriting was rushed, uneven, pressed hard into the paper as if written under pressure. Don't sign anything tonight. They're watching you. You're about to lose everything. Daniel read it once. Then again. Each word settled into place with quiet, deliberate clarity. They're watching you. Slowly, he lifted his gaze, scanning the room again, but this time, his attention sharpened. Focused. Patterns shifted. Near the bar, two men. He hadn't paid them much attention before. They blended well enough. But now, their suits were just a touch too formal for the setting. Their posture too controlled. One held a phone, but his thumb hadn't moved in several seconds. The other stared into a glass, using its reflection as a mirror. Watching the room. Watching him. Daniel's expression didn't change. Inside, however, something recalibrated. The deal. It had been set for tonight. A quiet acquisition. Discreet. Strategic. The kind of move that didn't make headlines until it was too late for anyone to react. No one was supposed to know. No one outside a very small, very controlled circle. And yet, they're watching you. He folded the note again, smaller this time, and slipped it into his pocket. His fingers lingered there for a fraction of a second before withdrawing. Then, as if nothing had changed, he picked up his fork and cut another piece of steak. He took a bite. Perfect. Tender, balanced, exactly as it should be. He chewed slowly, thoughtfully, as though the world remained exactly as it had been 5 minutes ago. But it didn't. Because now, every sound in the room felt sharper. Every movement more deliberate. The quiet hum of conversation carried an edge, like something just beneath the surface. Across the room, the waitress reappeared, weaving between tables with practiced ease. She didn't look at him this time. Didn't acknowledge anything had passed between them. Smart. Daniel swallowed, setting his fork down with quiet finality. The decision formed not as a reaction, but as a conclusion. No signature. No deal. Not tonight. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a few bills and placing them neatly beside the plate, far more than necessary, but not enough to draw attention. Then he stood. No hesitation. No pause. Just a man finishing his meal early. As he walked toward the exit, he didn't look back. Didn't acknowledge the two men at the bar, though he felt their attention shift, tracking him. The door opened. Cool air brushed against his face as he stepped outside. Behind him, the restaurant continued as if nothing had happened, unchanged, untouched, unaware. But Daniel Carter knew better. Because somewhere between the first cut of the steak and the last step out the door, everything had changed. And it had started with a single note. The alley behind the restaurant smelled faintly of rain and old brick, the kind of dampness that never quite left no matter how many dry days passed. A single flickering bulb hung above the back door, its weak light casting long, uneven shadows that stretched across the narrow passage like reaching fingers. Somewhere in the distance, a car passed, its sound muffled by the buildings, swallowed before it could fully arrive. Daniel stood just beyond the reach of the light, hands in his jacket pockets, posture relaxed but deliberate. To anyone glancing his way, he might have looked like a man waiting for a ride, or perhaps taking a quiet moment away from the noise inside. But there was nothing casual about the way his eyes tracked every detail, the door, the corners, the rhythm of the flickering bulb. He didn't wait long. The back door creaked open with a soft, tired sound, and she stepped out. The waitress. Up close, away from the curated warmth of the dining room, she looked different. Younger, maybe, or just more real. The soft lighting inside had hidden the faint shadows beneath her eyes, the tension in her jaw. Out here, there was no hiding it. She pushed the door gently behind her, careful not to let it slam, and turned, freezing for half a second when she saw him. You shouldn't be here, she said quietly, her voice low but firm. Her eyes darted briefly to the door, then down the alley, measuring risk. And yet, Daniel replied evenly, you left me a note. A flicker of frustration crossed her face. She stepped closer, lowering her voice further. I was hoping you'd just leave. Forget it. People like you usually do. People like me don't get anonymous warnings during dinner, he said. She exhaled through her nose, tension tightening her shoulders. For a moment, she looked like she might turn around and walk back inside, pretend none of this had happened. But she didn't. Instead, she took another step toward him, stopping just short of the light. Those men inside, she said, they're not just random customers. They've been asking about you all week. Daniel's gaze sharpened, though his expression stayed controlled. That's not possible. It is, she replied immediately. They had your picture. Not this version of you, but close enough. A quiet pause followed. Daniel's mind moved quickly, retracing steps, layers, contingencies. The identity he'd used tonight wasn't new, it had been tested, reinforced, protected. Only a handful of people could have connected it to him. Which meant one thing. This wasn't a coincidence. How do you know all this? He asked, his tone calm but edged now, like steel beneath cloth. She hesitated, just for a second. Then she said, because I was the one they asked first. That shifted something. Daniel studied her more closely, no longer just observing, evaluating. The way she held herself. The steadiness in her voice despite the tension. The fact that she hadn't run, hadn't tried to distance herself from this. What's your name? He asked. Lena. Lena, he repeated, as if testing it. Why help me? Her lips pressed together, her gaze dropping briefly to the ground before lifting again. For a moment, it seemed like she might deflect, give him something vague, something safe. But instead, she said, because I've seen what happens to people who don't know they're being set up. There was no hesitation in her voice now. Only certainty. Daniel tilted his head slightly. And what happens? They disappear, she said. Or worse, they stay, thinking they're in control while everything gets taken from them piece by piece. The words settled heavily in the space between them. Daniel reached into his pocket, pulling out the folded note. He held it for a moment, then glanced at it briefly before looking back at her. You wrote this fast. I didn't have time, she said. One of them kept watching me. I had to wait until I was near your table. Why not say something directly? Her expression hardened slightly. Because I don't know who else was listening. That answer satisfied him more than anything else she'd said so far. He folded the note again, slower this time, more deliberate. You said I was about to lose everything. I overheard them talking in the storage hallway, Lena said. They thought no one was there. They were discussing a contract, yours, I think. One of them said once you signed, it wouldn't matter what you tried to do after. You'd already be trapped. Daniel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The deal replayed in his mind, every clause, every safeguard, every advantage. He had reviewed it personally, alongside some of the best legal minds money could buy. And yet, if someone had manipulated the framework, if there were elements hidden just deep enough to pass initial scrutiny. No deal is ever that perfect, Lena added quietly, as if reading his thoughts. Not unless it's designed to be. A slow realization spread through him, cold and precise. It hadn't been an opportunity. It had been bait. Someone went to a lot of trouble, he said. They usually do, Lena replied. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The flickering bulb buzzed faintly overhead, the only sound in the stillness. Then she looked at him again, more directly this time. What are you going to do? Daniel slid the note back into his pocket, his fingers pressing it flat against the fabric as if anchoring the moment. I'm going to walk away, he said. Her brow furrowed slightly. Just like that. Yes. You don't even know who set you up. I will, he said calmly. But not tonight. There was no bravado in his voice. No anger. Just certainty. Lena studied him for a long second, as if trying to decide whether he truly understood what he was saying. Most people wouldn't, she said finally. Most people don't have as much to lose, he replied. That earned the faintest shift in her expression, not quite a smile, but something close to recognition. From inside the restaurant, a burst of laughter echoed faintly, followed by the distant sound of a door opening somewhere deeper within. Lena's head turned slightly, instinctively tracking it. You should go, she said, her voice tightening again. If they realize you're gone, they might come looking out here. Daniel didn't move immediately. Instead, he reached into his wallet and pulled out a card. It looked ordinary at first glance, no flashy design, no obvious markings, but there was a weight to it, a subtle quality that set it apart. He held it out to her. She hesitated before taking it, her fingers brushing his briefly as she did. What is this? She asked, glancing down at it. A number, he said. Direct. She looked back up at him, confusion flickering across her face. Why give this to me? Because you took a risk, he said. And because people who take risks like that usually need a way out sooner or later. Her grip on the card tightened slightly. I didn't do it for a reward. I know, he said. Then why? Daniel's expression softened just a fraction, something quieter replacing the sharp calculation that had been there before. Because tonight, he said, you stopped me from making the most expensive mistake of my life. The words landed with a weight that went beyond money. For a moment, Lena didn't respond. She just looked at him, really looked this time, as if trying to reconcile the man in front of her with whatever version of him those men inside had been hunting. Then, faintly, she nodded. "Be careful," she said. "I always am." Another sound from inside, the back door handle rattling slightly, as if someone had brushed against it from the other side. Daniel stepped back into the deeper shadow, his presence already beginning to dissolve into the darkness. "Take care, Lena," he said. And then he turned and walked away, his footsteps quiet, unhurried, disappearing into the night as if he had never been there at all. Lena remained where she stood, the card still in her hand. The alley felt different now. Quieter. Heavier. Inside the restaurant, the world continued, glasses clinking, voices rising and falling, deals being made and broken without anyone realizing how close one had come to disaster. She looked down at the card again, tracing its edge with her thumb. A way out, he had said. For the first time in a long while, the idea didn't feel impossible. Behind her, the door creaked open, light spilling briefly into the alley as someone stepped out, their voice calling for a smoke break, unaware of what had just passed in the shadows. Lena slipped the card into her pocket, her expression settling back into something neutral, something safe. But inside, something had shifted. Because sometimes, it didn't take much. Just one decision, one warning, one moment where someone chose to act instead of look away. And everything after that changed.